for those of you who don't know us, so the Energy Saving Trust, we have got an office based here locally in Canary Wharf. We have got other offices across the UK as well. But ultimately our mission is to help people save energy every day. And we are also devoted to promoting energy efficiency, energy conservation and sustainable use of energy across all sectors. I specifically work in the transport team. The transport team, we have a large portfolio of work that we deliver on behalf of the Department for Transport. We provide fleet reviews. We offer support for businesses and local authorities to accelerate the adoption of ultra-low emission vehicles. We also administer quite a few of the grant schemes and activities as well. So that's the Energy Saving Trust. I thought I'd start with a quick overview of some of the core drivers. What we find with these drivers is that they're always the same things. I find myself doing these presentations quite often and commenting on these four key topics as we go through. So, but it's worth just revisiting them. So, four key drivers for infrastructure. So we've got inward investment. The automotive manufacturing and the industries we know is heavily involved in creating these low emission vehicles and bringing them to market. But there's a heavy commitment from central government to make sure there's funding available, to make sure that the UK is the place for the production of these vehicles. But more importantly, we're developing a world-class infrastructure. That's one of the key activities that we're looking at. There's plenty of funding out there as well. Carbon, a massive activity and always in the news as well, specifically because we know that transport emissions are continuing to go up. Despite all the work that we're doing to get ultra-low emission vehicles on the road to improve efficiency, we are seeing more and more CO2 come up. And that's probably because latest stats from sort of government figures show that road traffic is up by a third. And we know mainly that's down to road logistics and travel and the demand for goods and parcels and services with those most polluting vehicles. So looking at those activities. But we need to address the transport sector. Air quality, it's always in the news. You may have heard Bristol this week confirming its plans for a clean air zone to directly tackle privately owned diesel vehicles by normal citizens, and doing a diesel-wide ban across the UK between so it's about 7 in the morning and 3 in the afternoon. So any diesel vehicles won't be able to go anywhere near Bristol city centre. That's massive. That's huge. And that can only help to drive up the interest as well. And stories such as Ella Kissy-Deborah on the bottom left down there, where her trial went through court case and it was linked directly to poor air quality, her premature death linked into that. That's massive, and that's actually quite a big threat for local authorities potentially as well. Lots of court cases and things potentially going towards them as well. And energy security, so fluctuating oil prices and increasing a consumer demand for renewable energy. That's what people want as they go forward. But certainly for me, I think at the moment this stuff is huge, and it's getting people into people's minds really. So the work that's going on by Extinction Rebellion, they're very active and ultimately they are raising awareness. They are causing a lot of disruption, but they are creating a lot of awareness that comes forward. I find this chart quite interesting on the left-hand side really. So looking at actually the perceptions of Extinction Rebellion across different age groups and different sectors. So you'll find that they're more popular typically with the sort of younger demographic and get less popular as you get slightly older. But previous studies, if you look at actually the perceptions of air quality, so the chart sort of flips around. So actually the perception of air quality amongst younger people is less, but with older people it's higher. So looking at actually the focus and the message actually will help us decide which sort of target market to look at really. So, and you may have seen yesterday that the restriction of their sort of activities was ruled unlawful yesterday, which now means they're back into sort of public eye really. So like them or hate them, they are doing a lot to promote the agenda and look at those sorts of activities. So lots going on. So we're trying to look at the drivers really in the journey so far. And I've done lots of work with businesses in previous jobs and in the current job and with local authorities to look at how we've got here on the charge point model. And I've sort of summarised it into sort of 3 core steps really, which I'll talk you through. And each of these steps sort of centres around a common question really. So the first one we've got really is, well, why do we actually need charge points? So most people ask that question first. What's the point in us investing in these really? Especially in the early day market, it was quite a slow market. There were limited ranges of the vehicles, etc. And most people had the common theme of someone else will sort this out for us. We don't need to worry about investing in infrastructure. Other cities, other businesses will pick this up and move down there. The Plugged-in Places scheme came along and actually did a lot of market capitalisation to get funding available, charge points installed and businesses able to actually use charge points as well, and that helped. But not a huge amount of people took that up, or we didn't look at that sort of future-proofing element. So that was our sort of first question really. Why do we actually need charge points? So then we moved to our sort of second stage model, which is more, well, actually we should probably think about getting some charge points. Things got serious. There are more and more vehicles onto the market. The 3-pin pretty much was sort of died off. People were less interested in 3-pin as it went forward. But what this meant was that people really did start to invest. The Go Ultra Low Cities campaign made funding available for local authorities to do mass networks. We started to see more focused regional networks. More funding has been made available. Increasingly now we're seeing new schemes come forward. So there's a new dealership electric vehicle approved scheme that's out now to identify dealers who are particularly good at selling electric vehicles. It's been pioneered by the NFDA, so worth investigating that as well. So lots of other early adopter bits going on. And the core bit is that people who are at this step have got a head start now. They've started to look at electric vehicles and move forward. But now we're at the latest stage now, which is what I call the sort of panic stage, which is why haven't we actually got any charge points left? That's what we really need to do. And it's a lot of authorities and businesses do tend to panic at the moment. And what that means is that they're leading to rush decisions, poor decisions, or strategies that don't actually make a lot of sense. We're just putting charge points in the wrong places, the wrong rates of power, and not in the right places. And that's where we need to be able to provide support around there. A lot of that comes down to the pressure of funding. We're regularly seeing press releases come out to say that funding hasn't been adopted by local authorities, or that people aren't taking it up as much as possible. And actually that's just adding on pressure for people to apply for stuff, maybe when it's not the right time for them, and it's certainly not helping them for the market around there as well. But the biggest trend that I've seen along this phase is that businesses in particular are no longer particularly looking at charge points in isolation. They're now looking at them as much part of a wider sustainable strategy that they're trying to adopt. So looking at vehicles and their businesses, their buildings and their operations to try and reduce carbon across the whole area, and not just focus on getting charge points into their car parks, which is what we've previously looked at before. So that's our sort of three key stage model. A lot of that has been driven by the growth in infrastructure. I mean, you've always got to quote ZapMap at some point in a presentation, so there's loads of data available from yesterday as well. But I think the really interesting bit, and we sort of picked up on this in the Norway model, and I thought it was really interesting in that presentation, to look at the three core stages and the changes that we've had. So looking previously where we had range anxiety, focused particularly on the vehicles, and we've pretty much tackled that now. You know, we know how good the ranges are these days. Then we had charging anxiety, that fear of having to queue to actually get onto a charge point. Not as extreme as the Norway model in the snow on Christmas Eve, but we certainly do see that on some motorway service stations. But really the core bit we've got at the moment is experience anxiety. So the amount of consumers, you only need to look on Twitter or look at reviews, etc., of charge points that aren't working, that can't be accessed. Drivers don't know how to access them, which network they need to be on, which cards or apps that they're going to need, all that sort of tech. That's really what's going to slow the market down, and that's what consumers really want to understand, really. We have to remember as well that we live in an EV bubble, so we talk and live electric vehicles all the time. Most consumers don't have a clue about the difference between an electric vehicle and a range-extended electric vehicle, or what a plug-in hybrid vehicle is. And they don't understand the different types of charge points. So we need to break the bubble down and make sure we share those sorts of realities as we come forward, because for many consumers, the myths really have just become reality for them. Another massive trend is residential. So residential charge points, this is probably the area that's receiving the most attention from local authorities at the moment, mainly because not many of them know exactly what it is they want to achieve here. They want to be able to give people the proviso to charge at home for lower costs and lower tariffs and give them that sort of activity. But with 2/3 of people having no access to off-street parking, that becomes very difficult. And we're seeing lots of different techniques, rapid charging hubs. We're seeing on-street residential schemes as they go forward and activities like there. But many don't actually know what the solution is that they want to do, and this is certainly a massive growth market, and it'll be interesting to see where this goes over the next sort of few years. Diversification as well of the oil sector. We've had lots and lots of announcements of oil companies picking up and buying charge point providers, and you can sort of see in the diagram provided by Delta there of where the market's going around there. This is great for the market. Brings in investment, brings in land, brings in property. It brings in money and marketing and reach, etc., all that sort of stuff around there. But it does start to make the market far more commercial, which takes the pressure off businesses and local authorities, which is great, but we are seeing more and more of a commercial market. And there's two sort of core streams of thought here with how people purchase them. They're either purchasing electric vehicles to use them as a fuel for transport, so trying to make sure that there's that provision there. Or you've got those that are looking more at the smart city agenda and how you can use those charge points more effectively as a data source, and we'll talk about that in some of the slides a little bit later on. So that's our sort of diversification bits. The core bit that we're finding is that consumers are demanding clarity, and they're demanding connectivity. That's the core bits that they want as they go forward. So with all this growth, focus on residential, focus on diversification, that's what consumers want. They want to be able to access bits. And there's lots of competition. So this is a sort of a small example from a local area down south. So they've got 4 different operators in a very close area to them. So in the very early stages, under the plugged-in places scheme, a charge point was installed in a leisure centre. It's quite a low cost for fast charging, quite a low cost for parking around there, so it wasn't too bad. Then the next scheme came along, which was the workplace parking scheme. So the local hospital applied for that scheme. This was purchased and procured through a completely different network, completely different back office system, completely different provider. A high cost for fast charging, a very high cost for parking associated with the hospital. So, but there's still 2 options for drivers there. Then there was a large announcement of a supermarket pairing up with a large provider of charge points across the UK for a national network. So they've included Rapid within their provision, but it's free fast charging, free parking, and a high cost for Rapids. And then recently, after an application to the on-street residential scheme, there's now a slow charging scheme with a cost down there. So there's loads of different options, but the core message for this bit is round here, they're all completely different networks, they're completely different back office systems, completely different tech, and drivers need different access systems to be able to get the best rates. They're all open access, anyone can access them, but to get the best rates, you need to be part of that membership scheme or part of that activity. And how is that providing any consumer confidence in the market? You wouldn't know what to buy, where to go, which is your best option for you. And this is the biggest issue we're going to face in the market at the moment for mass adoption, because drivers don't really understand where it is they need to go. So managing competition in the conurbation is one of the most important steps that both businesses and local authorities really need to consider and review as they go forward. We've seen loads of trends in the vehicle sector, and consumers are more open to this. So we know about inductive charging. Consumers are starting to understand what smart charging is, and they're realistically starting to understand what vehicle-to-grid charging is as well. And we're seeing that shift from the electric vehicle no longer being a car to being a portable store for energy and battery technology, etc., as it goes forward, which is great. But at the moment, we haven't seen that quite carry across onto the charge point scheme, which is where, again, we're starting to see a little bit more focus. So this big shift in focus is coming forward. So we're finding that people are installing infrastructure. Typically, they're focusing on providing a source of energy for electrified transport. So they're just there to provide power to get those vehicles moving, and that's great. But we've got this new activity coming forward, Future Cities. There's loads of funding available at the moment. Lots of local authorities are bidding for it. And the risk is that not enough people are focusing on this section, the Future City section, which is where we're heading longer term. Charge points are more than just plug sockets. They are massive data sources. They give us information about travel, battery states of charge. We're starting to see innovators come forward now, include things like Wi-Fi, 5G, sound sensors, ANPR, and various different air quality sensing, etc., all within the charge point. So actually being able to capitalise on that data set to look at mobility as a service and how we can start to use that to plan better cities, improve sustainable travel is really important. And that's where the risk is. If people just look at them at getting charge points in the ground to get power to the vehicles, they're going to miss out on this massive activity, and we're not going to be far enough ahead of the curve that we want to be as we go forward. Especially if we start to see potentially the data point moving away from the charge point and into the vehicle. So actually the smart external systems being controlled more by the vehicle than they are by the charge point. We need to look at what the role of the charge point is moving forward as massive data sets. So it's all stuff to look forward to. So how do we advise a local authority to go about this? So our sort of 4-step model, our SAFE model, that helps provide a local authority or any business really understand what it is that they need to do to make sure they're installing the right infrastructure in the right place. We get them to make sure it's sustainable, so we make sure that they think about where the energy's coming from. Is it renewable sources going into that electric vehicle and into that charge point? How long's the asset going to be there for? Is it profitable? Is it commercial? How's it going to be maintained longer term, to look at those sort of sustainable activities? Is it analysed? Have they thought about, is that the exact place for the charge point? Is that the right power, right place, right time for that equipment? Is it future-proofed? Reality, a lot of local authorities or businesses are putting in the trenching to just drag more cables through, and that's fine, that's great, that's early stage future proofing, but is that as far as we can go? Do we need to look at power capacity and demand, energy storage solutions, etc., to support upgrades in the future? And finally, and this is the most welcome bit, I think, that we're seeing, certainly from the consumer market that's active at the moment, is enforced. So the very early stage charge points had no enforcement on. You could just park anywhere. They were regularly iced by normal internal combustion engine cars, etc., meaning EVs couldn't get access to them. But actually, we're starting to see a much more welcome approach to enforcement across all local authorities and businesses as we go forward, which is all useful. So that's how we can help people get towards their sort of future cities agendas. So it's a little bit of a whistle-stop tour just to try and discuss the journey that we've been through so far, really. I think the core bit for me is that we already understand the drivers, those sort of 4 key themes, and they've always been here and they're never really going to go away and they're always going to be there, but they're just going to become more important as we come forward and more in the public eye, so it's worth keeping an eye on those. Most importantly, consumers want clarity and connectivity. We want to avoid that model of different networks and consumers not understanding how to access different things as we go forward. And we need to think smarter, and we need to make sure the charge points go in the right place at the right time, and we're thinking about this future cities agenda, what data can we get from them and how can we use them really. And ultimately, all of us in the room have a job to make sure that no business turns into Gordon Ramsay. We need to make sure that people know the activities that they can get in there, which charge points to install, and how to make sure they can accelerate the adoption of ultra-low emission vehicle technology as quickly as possible. Thank you very much.